Hello, and welcome back to A Mental Break. It has been a minute. My apologies, guys. It's been it's been an interesting couple of years since my last episode. Or, I guess it came out like late of last year, so it's been a few months. But we're back at it. I'm back. We're making new episodes. A Mental Break is back. And what better way to ring in Season 3 with my special guest for today on this episode. It's my buddy Phil. He's an amazing producer, a super talented musician, a great pal, number one dad in all of our hearts and all of our minds. Superhero himself, Mr. Phil. Phil, welcome to the show. How you doing, buddy?
Thank you. Oh my god. I'm doing very well. Yeah, as we just mentioned, we're having a good early morning chat, which is gonna, I feel like, propel us both into our lovely rest of our day.
I think so. For those listening and watching, Phil and I are not exactly morning people,
Not necessarily.
as we discussed. And it is currently not that early in the morning for most people, but...
It's like degenerate early, though.
yeah, exactly. If you were up till 5 in the morning last night, this is early for you.
Yeah.
So, there's that. So, yeah, Phil, thank you so much for being on the show. I
Thank
really
you for
appreciate it.
having
For those tuning in, can you just, let people know more about yourself? I obviously know we go back, We go back, what do we say, 6 years, something like that?
Yeah, for what feels like ever in a short life. Yeah, we go back since the Common Chase days. Who introduced the two of us? Would have been Lena?
I feel like it was Jesse, I believe.
Jesse, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, we go back since I played bass in your band for a couple of shows, a few years ago. Because one of my best friends, Jesse, our mutual friend, was the drummer. And, so to
go back even further, I met Raph at H-Bar doing those open mic nights. And then from there, he introduced us to Jesse, who became our drummer. And then through Jesse, we met you.
The long chain of friendship.
It's just... But actually, Phil and I go back further than that, don't we? We go back to Egyptian time, right?
Yeah. We're
Greek philosophy time.
We're actually God's oldest friends. Yeah.
God's oldest friends.
Nobody. If at first there was light and darkness, you're one and I'm the other one.
Exactly. I like to imagine that. What's that famous painting again? Is it the dinner? The dinner scene?
The Last Supper. The dinner.
I'm not very good at fucking Greek history, clearly.
Isn't that Roman?
I don't know.
The dinner.
The dinner.
Don't kill me.
Welcome to a mental break, Phil.
Yeah.
The dinner. Holy fuck. Yeah, the dinner. There's those nice cups on the table.
Gorgeous.
Phil and I made those cups. Not too many people know that.
Yeah, truly.
Handcrafted by Phil and I.
Handcrafted.
That's how far we go back.
And then we crushed beers out of them night after night at the dinner.
Ye old ale.
Ye old ale, dude.
Anyways, buddy, let the people know. Who Phil Hirst is.
Yeah, I am a producer, engineer, and session musician in Toronto. I run a studio downtown, which has actually just moved from kind of in the east of Toronto right into the middle. I am a session musician, so I play in a ton of bands and have a ton of fun. Namely, MBG and Soft Cult are the two that keep me having fun on stage. And and I mix a ton of tunes. I love to mix. And if you go to superhotmixes.com, you can find out all about it.
I love the plug. Go check Phil out. I can't vouch for him enough. He's such a great person and a great mind for music, and yeah, his work's awesome. It speaks for itself. So
Thank you. Appreciate that.
yeah, of course, man.
Yeah. One of the first full length projects I ever got to work on in Toronto was actually your record.
Oh
which
no
was
shit!
rad.
I didn't know it was
Yeah.
your first.
Well, the first in Toronto, yeah, I hadn't lived here that long when
That's
we were
true.
working
You
on
just
that.
moved
Like,
up there, like
yeah, I
what? Maybe
just
a few
moved.
months before that or something.
Yeah, I went to college in London, right?
Right.
And so I probably had moved here maybe half a year or a year before that.
Yeah.
But that was like before the pandemic, like all that.
Yeah, I think we made that record in 2019, I think,
2019?
right?
Yeah. Yeah, and that was a ton of fun. At Adriano's old studio that he had
Yeah.
for like a bit. That
very
place
first studio.
slapped. Yeah, that was wicked, dude.
Yeah, that was a cool spot.
If he could have kept that one just forever, that would have been so rad.
Yeah, it would have been sick. That was like really well treated and was a fun space to work out of.
Yeah, it had a fun little kitchen and stuff. It was great.
Yeah.
My new studio is also wicked.
It does look pretty sick. I can't wait to
Yeah,
come
man.
check it out and maybe work on some stuff there eventually.
Maybe get the common chase back together.
Holy fuck. Let's not start rumors.
Yeah.
All right, man. So I like to ask every guest that I have on the show, before we get into like the nitty gritty of it all with mental health, just how they're feeling today. Like, do they feel comfortable, and are they consenting to talk about some mental health stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. I am comfortable today. I'm in my beautiful house. The sun is shining. It's a nice day in Canada. Few and far between, it feels like sometimes.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'm feeling more primed than ever to tackle some of these subjects.
Okay, perfect. So let's get into it. The first question I have for you, Phil, is what mental health struggles or illnesses do you deal with, if any?
Yeah, for me, it's always been pretty much just like intense, at times manic depression. When I was in high school, it was like pretty bad. Everyone goes through it as a teenager, I think, but I was like, I was seeing a therapist for a while about it because I was just like, it was very manic, It would be very like, I'm the king of the world to I'm gonna kill myself right now all the time.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
But it was it felt like it swung a lot in that time, and since then I feel like I think because of the way I tend to live my life, which is like the thing that I do for work is music. My hobbies are all music. All my friends make music. It's like I kind of have this one ultimate thing in my life, and because of that, it's like when that's going well, my self-worth tends to be really high and good.
And attached to that.
Yeah, and then when things aren't going well, it's like that one thing is like my whole life. Like when I feel like I can't be creative, I feel like it's difficult sometimes to separate that from reflecting on me as a person, being like, oh, fuck, that's my thing, right?
Right.
So,
like leaning so heavily into the one end all be all that you think is like the purpose, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean it is, but it just sometimes it defines the way I think about myself more than it necessarily should. And I feel like in more recent years, as I've done more therapy, I learned to separate who I am from the art that I create a little bit more.
Right.
Because it can be tough.
Yeah, you got to find that comfortable space in between both, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like find the happy medium, if you will.
Yeah, which is really hard sometimes.
It's certainly hard.
Yeah, so that was, I've had like a few periods in my life where I was like really depressed. Yeah.
Any anxiety at all, or just depression?
No, I've never been particularly anxious, actually. I feel like my kind of depression was like more... wasn't like I was like ever scared to do anything. Like I didn't feel the fear of leaving my house or seeing my friends or whatever. It was literally just like the will. Like I the way it manifested in me, it was like I physically can't stand up.
I see.
Stuff like that.
Right. And you
Yeah.
said it would like come and go in waves. So when I was younger, before I started to like learn more about mental health and like what it all means and stuff to me and to other people, I used to call it like flash depression. If that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
kind of like you were talking about how it's like one moment you can be on top of the world, and then the next day you're like, I fucking hate myself and everyone
Yeah.
around me. You know, like it's so weird how it like comes and goes in waves like that. You know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, and I totally feel that, and it feels like one big success or one big failure can kind of swing that needle of like I feel so good about myself to like I feel like trash, I look like trash, everything is bad, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And like the waves are like intense, like you said. Like the highs are so high, but the lows are so low, and it's like I just want some sort of like middle ground.
Yeah.
Like you know,
Yeah, for real.
not feel numb,
Yeah.
but like not the
No,
extremes.
but maybe just have a little more. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I felt really like just aided by therapy, because I feel like the big lesson I learned in like the way that I particularly get depressed is that I need to just separate the things that I'm achieving in my life from my self-worth a little bit more.
Yeah,
And once
yeah,
I
yeah.
started to do that, I feel better about, I can have bad days at the studio or play a bad gig or whatever, and I don't spend the rest of the week like being like, you're the worst thing. You know?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Finding that detachment, like, from having your self-worth so tied in, like neatly with like what your goals and ambitions are. Like it's
Yeah.
good to have that, obviously, but it's like you have to
Yeah.
have that separation as well.
Yeah, and maybe just feel it a little less strongly, you know? Learn to leave some of the failures, like, just like on the fence outside your house.
Right. Or like
You know?
try to flip it the script and use it to motivate you
Yeah.
rather than deter you, right? It's
Yeah.
hard. It's easier said than done, obviously, with depression, but
Yeah, definitely. But, yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah, try to let it, like, motivate you.
cool, man. Okay, well, thank you for opening up about that. My follow-up question to that would be, have you ever been diagnosed with the depression, or if you haven't, would you ever consider getting a diagnosis?
No, I never was. Like, when I felt that way, I think it was apparent to the people around me. And so, at the time, some friends talked to my parents about it and just said they felt like I was, like, going through something. And my parents basically were just, like, they kind of freaked out. And
Oh,
they
wow.
just immediately were like, we need to find you a therapist. Because they also, at the time, were divorcing-ish. Like, had a couple of years before.
Right.
And I'm not necessarily sure that was what triggered it. But I think they thought that. They were like, oh my god, like, we've ruined our child. And so they found a therapist. I guess counselor, whatever the one where it's like, I think she only had a master's. But I
Yeah.
would just go and talk to her. And, yeah, and honestly, yeah. I think, yeah, speaking to a therapist, counselor, whatever, helped me in so many ways in my life.
Oh, it's huge. Yeah.
Yeah, like way beyond just that. Yeah. Anyway,
Right.
yeah. So I never I was never diagnosed by a doctor, but I
Okay.
went to a therapist for a bunch of years,
Yeah.
or at least like probably a couple of years, and I was definitely not feeling well.
Right.
Definitely
And
not
so,
feeling well.
when you were meeting with her, did she ever bring up like, "Hey, this might be depression," or?
Yeah, a ton. And she would use terms like she sometimes was a little more broad with it. She would say things like, does it feel like you're on a boat in the middle of the ocean and you can't see land? Or like, does it feel like you can see the land but you don't know how to get there? Or stuff like that, you know?
Got it. More like imagery based.
Yeah. And I feel like I've always responded well to that. I mean, she definitely used the word depression a number of times, but
Sure.
yeah, I feel like, yeah, it was, yeah, more of like a descriptive thing.
Right. So it's kind of like a I guess I'd call that like a semi-diagnosis.
Yeah. I'm not sure. Like if you want to be diagnosed with depression, would you do that with a medical doctor?
You can. It depends. Like, there's like a bunch of different types of diagnosis, right? Like, you can go to a therapist and they can, talk to you about it, and then they can give a diagnosis.
Yeah.
Or you can get it medically checked as well. Like, you can go get your blood work done, and then you can see like a physician, and then the physician in tandem with the therapist will decide if that's what the diagnosis should be or not.
True.
Because if it's severe, obviously, then that requires medication, perhaps, right? So that's
right.
when the doctor would have to come in.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a bunch of different ways. As far as I know, there's not exactly one path. Like, I know my path, but like I've talked to a lot of people on this show now that have had many different paths of finding their diagnosis. Like, some people are self-diagnosed, some people are diagnosed with their therapist or their counselor, by a physician, a doctor. Like, there's a lot of different ways to find out, right? So.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really good to know. Yeah.
Yeah, of course, man.
Good resources to have.
So it sounds like you had a little bit of help with that therapist when you were younger, which is good. So you had, she kind of gave you an idea of what it might be, at least. So you weren't walking like blind. Like,
yeah.
Why am I so upset all the time?
Yeah, I think I knew what it was. Yeah. I could tell at the time that it wasn't normal, because all my friends were like really, or at least seemed really excited about life.
Right. And you're sitting there going, why don't I feel the same?
Yeah, it was bad, yeah.
Okay, man. And, I mean, at this point in your life now, like, do you find yourself wanting a diagnosis for clarity, or are you just okay with where it's at?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I feel like when I get depressed now, it lasts longer, but it doesn't feel as intense. Maybe that's the trade-off, right? I think now it's like I can be really upset about something for a couple of weeks, and it usually is something in that same way that's like tied to my job and life.
Right.
But it's like maybe I'm better at rationalizing. I don't know. It's like it doesn't sting as bad in the moment. But right. I feel like now, yeah. At times I think that can be a bad thing though, when you just let stuff simmer under the surface like that, like.
Yeah, repression is a horrible thing.
Yeah, I feel like I'm gonna give myself a heart attack sometimes. But no, I'm not sure I would go get diagnosed now. Okay. Yeah, I feel like for me, like, going to therapy is enough.
Yeah,
is
that's
enough.
Totally
and I know
fine,
it works for me, and yeah.
And like, by no means, like, and I always tell the guys, like, this is just me, like, curious, asking this question.
Oh yeah, totally.
Because I don't want to invalidate anybody in like the way they feel, and like just because they don't have a diagnosis, you know what I mean? Like, what you have is what you have, and what you feel is what you feel, regardless of what a fucking doctor or therapist, whatever, tells you. Like, if you think it's depression and it feels like depression, it's probably depression.
Yeah. Totally.
You know what I mean? So, but sometimes I've heard from people, and for myself too, like, getting that diagnosis from a professional or a third party, regardless of who it is sometimes can be motivating, because at least it gives you clairvoyancy on like what you're dealing with. You know, it's kind of like presenting it in front of you, and it's not like a guessing game anymore.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay, so I was right. This is this, and this person outside of me in my immediate circle also sees this. You know, so it might be a clarity thing. That's why I ask people. I'm just like, would you get a diagnosis? Because sometimes it's clarifying, and like it can send you down the path of figuring out how to manage it better, rather than just tackling it by yourself. Just.
Yeah. No, I think that is a really fantastic resource to have. Like, and I feel like, me personally, I don't think I could see myself being medicated anymore. Just because of the way that made me feel.
Yeah.
I feel like if in severe cases, like where that is, I feel like a route that is a positive route, getting getting a diagnosis is really important. And I feel like, honestly, in the future, if I ever swung really low again, like if I was ever just feeling bad, I would consider that, because, yeah.
It might give you some clarity if
and
you
validation and yeah.
Sure, yeah, whatever it is that you're seeking for the diagnosis, right? I'm sure it'll find you.
Yeah, definitely.
And then that way you can get some resources from whoever you get the diagnosis from to maybe help you manage a bit better and like find your way through that dark path.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah, man. All right, well, moving along here. I like to ask my guests what their experience has been like, or their perspective of dealing with their mental health. And so the way I kind of like to guide this question is more so like a timeline. So like, give the audience a perspective of like the earliest you can remember feeling this way. And like, you don't have to know the exact cause of it, because a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
But like, you know, start us from like when you started feeling the manic depression and what that journey's been like up until now.
Yeah, well, yeah, it started, I want to say probably around the time of high school-ish. I think I just felt really kind of aimless for a while. Honestly, like, yeah. I think I just kind of felt like I didn't really have like I didn't have a focus for a while. Like when I was a teenager, it just kind of felt like I was just kind of drifting through the ether of high school and not really. Yeah. I didn't really hate it, but I didn't really love it.
Right.
And I feel like, yeah, I just started to. It was that same thing, like a self-worth thing. Like I just kind of felt like if I didn't have like a thing to focus on, maybe it was like, you know, anticipation of greater life. I was like starting to feel like, what am I going to do with my life? And it just felt like I had nothing for a while. You know, I was already like doing some music shit, but you definitely couldn't have told me at the time that it was going to turn into all this.
Right.
Yeah. And so I feel like, yeah, I would just get, I would get into these like funks when it felt like, oh, I tried something out and I'm bad at it, or like, you know, I'm not enjoying this thing the way I used to, or whatever. And I would just, it was like I would rather sleep all day and do nothing and kind of hide in my parents' basement,
right?
And like even try to do anything sometimes. And I feel like I started kind of struggling in school because of that.
Okay.
And that made me feel worse. It was like I just struggled so bad to do homework and like finish projects and study for tests and stuff.
Right.
And it wasn't necessarily that I wasn't interested. Like I like to learn. It just felt kind of like, yeah, I don't know. I just felt really kind of aimless, and like the inertia of starting to do anything was like unbreakable. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then I feel like as I kind of recoiled for a little bit, yeah, it was like it almost just compounded on itself and made itself worse.
I was just about to say, the compounding, it sounds like, of you already not wanting to do anything and then having all these things at that age to have to do, and it's just like...
Yeah, and people being like, oh, university, oh, whatever, this and that. And so, yeah, I was feeling really depressed for a while. And then some friends of mine, basically told my parents. They were like, yo, like, Phil doesn't seem to want to come outside anymore. Wow. Is he okay? Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, because I was like really, I just didn't want to do anything like for a while. And they checked in on me, and I was like, yeah, just not doing great. And I think, yeah, like I kind of said before, they freaked out because they'd gotten divorced a few years earlier.
Right.
But it wasn't really it wasn't really a bad one.
I was going to ask if that like might have triggered anything for you. Like,
yeah, like I'm sure it did to a degree, but through therapy, I've kind of found like I don't really have a lot of resentment for either of my parents for doing that. They never fought in front of us. It wasn't. I think both my parents are like very passive people.
Right. So
when they got divorced, I think we just kind of didn't really see it coming, you know? It just was kind of like they never really yelled at each other in front of us. They never really
Right. So it came as a
showed that
surprise
stuff.
to you.
Yeah. And then my mom moved like a block away.
Oh
Like,
wow! So it's like so close still.
Like so close it was weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like when I say a block, like I mean I swear to God, if there were no trees in the way, I could have thrown a baseball from one house to the other one. Like
That's so interesting.
It was strange. Yeah. And so I mean maybe that was part of it because I mean I know this too. Like when I was a teenager, I did kind of feel like because my parents lived so close together, they could kind of just like send me and my sister back and forth whenever they had stuff to do.
Right.
So I feel like part of my like feeling a little bit aimless was kind of just this idea that it was like I didn't really feel like I had like a specific spot to be, to create, to focus on
you're
stuff.
constantly like flip-flopping between both houses, right?
Yeah, and but it wasn't even in a situation where there was like, it was like I could stay at either house, and nobody was angry at anybody or trying to pawn anybody off. It just kind of always felt like like both our parents are really busy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm just kind of like jumping around down this strange street, like
Yeah.
but yeah, and so I'm sure that did trigger some of it actually. But
I'm sure subconsciously it definitely affected. I mean, like you were so young too, right? Like how old were you when they like,
probably 12ish.
Yeah, so 12, like you're just about to start high school. Like that's kind of when you start like trying to sort out your identity as a person, you know, like
Yeah, and I think they thought that too, because I'm sure when they, like my friends told them I was acting all really depressy, they were kind of like, yeah, like this is because of us, like we need to get this kid in therapy right away.
they took
like,
responsibility for it themselves. Yeah.
Exactly.
And like it's interesting too because I've talked to people that like, and I like again I don't want to ever invalidate anybody by saying this, and so don't misconstrue when I say this, but like you don't have to have a traumatic childhood or something tragic happen to you to have mental health illnesses. Like some people are just ill, and like it's a chemical imbalance in your brain, right?
Yeah.
So it just boils down to like you either have it or you don't, and like just because your parents have divorced might have triggered it more for you, or you know you had it to begin with, and like it was just an added thing on top of it, right? So
yeah, and I'm sure, you know, I mean, therapy has also told me that sometimes I like to downplay stuff. So I'm sure it affected me more than I even still realize maybe. But I do feel lucky that my parents took responsibility in those situations, and also like just didn't, like they didn't talk badly about each other, and they didn't yell at each other and stuff. Like in general, it was, I feel lucky maybe that it was like the best version of a divorce.
Right.
It seemed like it probably could be.
Could have been worse, probably. Yeah.
Definitely could have been worse. Yeah.
Or maybe maybe it was bad, but they did a good job of like keeping you guys out of the ugliness, if there was any.
Yeah. Exactly.
Which is good on them. It's most parents don't have the foresight for that, so
struggle to do that. Yeah, and I understand personal relationships are tough.
Oh, absolutely.
But so anyway, then after high school, returning to the time.
That's okay. Yeah, go ahead.
After high school, when I was in college, honestly, I was kind of doing pretty good for a while. I think my mental health struggles in college were just like abusing liquor and drugs.
Mm-hmm. The two vices.
But in general, it was fine. I did really well in college, like class-wise, and like I managed to make a lot of music and meet a lot of cool friends and whatever. Like it kind of felt like this like switch up from high school, where I kind of felt like just like a lame weird guy, and then when I got to college and I finally like moved out and stuff, I feel like it was popping for a while. It was good. I felt good and confident and stuff, and then I feel like it was like right after college when that ended, that kind of aimless feeling came back. And that like year or whatever, 8 months between when I was in college and I moved to Toronto, um, I I feel like that's when it like came back hard, and that's when it came back kind of a lot more bubbling under the surface, but
Right.
like just would last longer and kind of not go away.
Right. It's probably because you had so many years there in college where you felt that, like, I don't want to use the word purpose, but like, you felt,
Yeah. Well, it was like that though. It was like you had a schedule made by someone else
exactly.
for every day of your life. Like you literally have like a
Yeah.
purpose. It's like a
You had
place
like
to be, a
a
thing to
wake
go
up
to.
guideline for each
Yeah.
day, you know, and like, you get up, you do your classes, you have this, you meet these cool people that also feel the same way about you about music, like,
Yeah.
you start making these connections, and like, you have a roadmap basically, and then like, once that stops, it's kind of like, uh-oh, where's my roadmap?
And then and then I'm out and I'm like, oh god, I have a music degree. Like, what the fuck? Oh no.
You're like,
Yeah, everything my parents said were true. Like, I should have gone to business school.
Business school.
You know,
Yeah.
Should have been doing business.
Yeah, the self-doubt comes creeping in, right?
Yeah, and so, but I always knew that, you know, I was gonna do music stuff, like from as soon as, basically, I took a year off after high school between that and college, and I just knew it was, in those moments, I was like, oh fuck, business school, like,
Yeah,
there's no way that's gonna happen, yeah, and so, yeah.
You might have been more depressed, honestly, if you went that route.
Yeah, I kind of think I would have been, and I don't think I would have enjoyed those years so much.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, then I felt kind of aimless again. So me and Morgan had decided we were going to move to Toronto, right?
Mhm.
And I was like kind of really scared that we were just like, so many people we knew in fucking Fanshawe College just were not just staying in London, and that seemed like the end of the world. Like, it really did.
Yeah,
and I was
feeling.
kind of scared that like in that year I was like, if I don't figure this out soon, like I'm just gonna die in London, Ontario, you know?
Oh
Like,
no, not London.
yeah, dude, anything but. And if anyone from London is watching this,
Shout out to you guys.
fuck your city, I hate it.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Caleb, if
So-
you're watching, we don't mean it.
Caleb, if you're watching, you're a cool guy.
Caleb's sick.
Caleb is sick. But yeah. So we made it happen. We moved to Toronto, and I feel like, honestly, I did feel good again for a while. I had like sold a bunch of music gear and shit to pay for it,
Yeah.
and so for the first few months, I like had a little bit of cash in the bank. But then I feel like when that stopped, I don't know why. I kind of thought when we moved here, it would just be like, all right, here's 1,000 gorgeous job offers and like working on everybody's cool album.
Yeah.
Not realizing that like nobody likes people that are fresh out of college. Like, at least not yet. Like, you know, like having a college degree is good, but like I feel like in the music industry specifically, everyone's so sus of people who are like, I just graduated college 10 minutes ago.
Right.
You know,
yeah.
like,
It's like, where's the life experience?
yeah, there's some lessons that they do not teach you, it turns out.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so I was like interning at this studio, not even gonna name it. And
I know what it is, that's fine.
yeah. And yeah, and they were like treating me bad, and I was like, oh, the music industry sucks, and I'm not getting paid enough. And then it just like, yeah, it seemed like it flipped again. And there was like another like 6 months of just like this bubbling anxiety, depression under the surface. Like,
Yeah.
like just, it was like I had cool opportunities, but I just literally didn't want to go out, like
Right.
get out of bed every day and get them.
It's
Like,
hard, man.
It is, yeah. And I feel like Toronto's daunting in that way too.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's the biggest city in our country.
Hmm.
And so there's just a lot of people everywhere walking around looking hot and making money. And it's like, I want to be one of those. And it can be a struggle to yeah, a struggle to then, like, back to the defining yourself by your output thing, you know.
Absolutely.
It's like, if I'm not making money and seizing those cool opportunities, then my self-worth goes back down.
Of course. And there's, especially living in a bigger city like Toronto, there's always the comparison factor that files in. You're always comparing yourself to everybody else around you because it's such a vast city and there's so many people doing similar things to you. And it's like,
everybody else around
that
you.
producer's doing this with these clients, or that artist is doing this with this, you know, like it's just
yeah, and like going to other people's studios and being like, where did you get $1 bajillion to build this?
right? Like how is this like a
How did this
floating
even
fucking
happen?
floor and a floating ceiling? And it's like, how did you get this?
Yeah, that kind of shit was nuts. Yeah, and so I had this period again, and then too, just money. It's like, you know, everyone says it's expensive to live here, and I feel like once you kind of just get the ball rolling, it doesn't necessarily feel that way so bad anymore.
Yeah.
Like, it sucks to pay rent, but it's like, now that I've been paying high Toronto rent for so long, it's like, it just kind of feels like it is what it is.
Yeah, you get used to it, I think.
Yeah. But, like, yeah, when I first moved here, it was like I just hadn't thought about how much money I was going to realistically need, you know?
Yeah.
And so it was kind of like, yeah, then I was, like, really scrounging. I was selling a lot of music gear for a while.
I remember those days.
Yeah. I used to have some cool stuff. Sad, but fair. And it helped me live in the industry. And then when COVID happened...
Yeah, the big elephant in the room.
When COVID happened, I don't know if this... I'm sure this wasn't most people's experiences. I felt so good for a while. The first, like, year and a half of COVID was straight up, like, one of the most chill, fun, relaxing times of my entire life.
I remember we talked about this. I don't know when we talked about this. I think we talked about it, like, last year or something. Like, you and I were talking about it, and you were, like, saying that, like, yeah, like, COVID, like, the first year was, like, one of the best years for me. And I was like, wow, that's interesting.
Isn't that crazy? And I still feel that way. Like, that shit was wicked. When the government was just sending us cash, the amount of money that the government was sending me was enough to cover my bills. And because I wasn't going to bars and stuff anymore, buy all my groceries and even, like, have a little bit of extra money. Like, me and Morgan, when we were living together at the time, we, like, had enough money to buy skateboards. And so we just, like, bought these really nice skateboards and just started skateboarding again for the first time in, like, 10 years.
Hell yeah.
And we would just go out every single day and skateboard all day while it was sunny and drink a ton of beers and, like, just make tunes and hang out. We lived in a house with a big backyard that was all, like, green.
It's a nice place.
Yeah,
well, the house not so much, but the backyard.
Yeah. But the backyard was gorgeous.
Yeah,
and we had a whole basement, so we did a big studio down there, and so we would literally just, like, skateboard and, like, drink beers with two of my best friends in the world and make music all day. Like, that first year and a half of COVID fucking slapped. And if I could go back and do it again, I would. Not for the world, but
you're the only person that's gonna say
I
that.
know, dude. Isn't that crazy? Like, I've never been so at peace. It was once stuff started to come back, that anxiety, like, I felt really depressed again for a while.
Yeah, I bet. And like, that's like a common occurrence, I think, for most people, including myself too. Like, when the world started to come back after not being the world for like 2 years, it was like, holy shit, right? We're living people.
Yeah. Golly. Yeah. And having to then, it was just like thinking about making money again, you know?
Yeah, the financial struggle.
Because it was crazy, yeah. Because I was thinking by that point, it was like, I can't just keep... Like, I was so done working for other people, especially after having a year and a half of, like, awesome fun times.
Right.
And not, like, having to, like, work for a boss.
Yeah.
It was like, I'd always known that running my own business was eventually going to be for me. I'm not good. I'm a bad employee. I'm sure you know, even just by knowing me and what I'm like, I don't make a fantastic employee. Maybe I shouldn't say that on this podcast in case one day I need a job and there's like a soundbite out there that's
and
like,
this is a reference.
I'm a fucking bad employee. Yeah. Yeah. I show up late and I don't want to work for you. Like, whoever my boss is, it's like, I'm going to show up late and I don't want to do the work. But when I work for myself, I show up early and I'm excited about it.
Right.
So
motivated.
Yeah, so that's great. Like, it's like, I love working for myself. And so I knew I needed to. But I mean, you remember at the beginning of COVID when everyone was like, this is sick, I'm going to learn a skill or like do a thing or build my business or blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, yeah.
And then nobody actually did it other than fake people online.
Sure.
And so I was like, fuck, I've just squandered a year and a half. I had all this money that the government sent me, spent it on skateboards and booze. I bought like 8 pairs of shoes.
Nice.
Like, and I'm just tearing holes in the fucking pinky toe.
The essentials,
The essentials. And so, yeah, so coming back to it, it was like, I really didn't want to work for a boss again. The last job I had before COVID, I worked at Moog Audio, and that was like fun.
I remember you telling me that, yeah.
Yeah, that shit was fine. But that was just because it was like a synth store and because everyone else that worked there was just like me.
Right, right.
And so, I was like really scared. And I feel like I like really got in a rut for a bit. And I knew I had like only a few months left of like money in the bank to just not figure it out for a while. And I kept telling myself like, all right, you got 3 months now to figure it out, and then you're basically out of cash. And then it was like, okay, you got like 2 months to figure it out, and then you're basically out of cash. And I just could not, like, I just felt so like that just bubbling like self-worth failure thing under the surface.
Yeah, it's
I was just like curled
feeling.
up. Yeah. And it took a long time to kind of jump out of that. And to the point that, I mean, I basically had to when it was like, I have no money now. Like, if I don't find a job that pays me something in the next, like, 3 weeks, then it's like next month's rent is in jeopardy.
Yeah.
So I started, like, scouring the internet for places that were, like, studios or music adjacent, even. I looked at a bunch of jobs. There was this job for, like, to become it was like you would be someone that would take people's analog stuff, whether it was like tapes or cassettes or videos and stuff, and just digitize it. So it's like they would give you like all kinds of different mediums, and you would just make like computer files out of them and send them to people.
Got it.
And at first I thought that was going to be cool, but then as I like went to interview for it, I was like, oh, this is going to be so boring. Like, It's not like I'm like watching these people's family memories. It's like I'm just loading it up and just reeling it into like an MP4.
Yeah, whatever, exactly.
Yeah. And I was trying all this stuff, and then I found these guys. Not gonna name them either, but they.
You know who you are.
You know who you are. They had this studio out in Mississauga, and they just like knew some rappers. And so it was a way for me to just like start working as an engineer on stuff that wasn't like just my own stuff. And I had a car at the time, so I could just whip out there. And and so worked on some rappers for them, which was rad at the time. And then they decided to close their studio.
Yeah.
And so I basically just had all the contacts of all the rappers I've been working with. And so I kind of was like, okay, well, I have these clients. I didn't really know what they had been charging them. I knew what I was getting paid.
Yeah.
And I thought maybe if I just find a space to work, I can figure this out, figure it out better. And so I asked my buddy, who I had been doing a bunch of work for before COVID, my buddy Ethan. Shout out the kid.
Shout out Ethan.
Spider Sound, baby. He was working out of the Cube building in Toronto.
The infamous Cube.
Yeah, and he had the bottom floor, and so before COVID, I had like edited some of his sessions, and like we had been friends for a long time. He also went to college in London, like we had known each other for a long time. And so I just like done a bunch of work with him. We had spent a lot of time making music together and whatever. And he was spending a lot more time out of the country, like just working on stuff. And so I asked him, I was like, would you want to just like split part of the Cube with me, like while you're not in town? And it worked. He was like down for it. And so I had all these clients that I'd been handed after like working for this other studio for a while. I had found a place. Yeah, and it all worked out, kinda. I was like feeling really good about it for a while, yeah. And then I feel like when Ethan came back, and like I wanted to get my own space and stuff, I didn't want to be sharing anymore. And then the guy in the top floor of the Cube moved out, and I was like, okay, well I'll just go up there, I guess.
To the top.
And so suddenly I had my own space, but then it was like, oh shit, I need even more money.
Yeah.
And then it was like a lot of those clients were just like inconsistent. And then I just started to get this thing again. It was like I wasn't necessarily working on the stuff I wanted to be working on.
Right.
I was paying huge amounts to like have the studio and have my house. And so I felt like I was just grinding so crazy again. And I just started to get that self-worth thing again. Like it really just started to like bubble.
That sense of failure, you know, it's a hard thing to come to terms with.
Yeah.
And then from that manifests the depression, right? Because it's like you're trapped in like this vicious cycle of like, oh, I'm not doing what I want to be doing. Like I have all these fucking bills to pay, yada yada. Like, and everything adds up, and then that darkness shrouds over, and it's like, ugh.
Yeah, and it's straight up tough. Yeah, and I feel like, that was kind of when I knew I was like, I gotta start thinking about my mental health again. You know?
Yeah.
I hadn't seen a counselor since before COVID, and it was just like I just gotta make habits that are healthier. If I'm gonna work for myself, I have to schedule myself better.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
I have to like consider it a job rather than just like getting random texts and showing up to the studio at all hours of the night.
Yeah. You gotta avoid burnout.
You gotta avoid burnout. That's a huge thing too. I'm sure a lot of people on here have talked about burnout, but yeah, and I feel like more recently that's been my struggle. Like I've been working a lot lately. A lot. Yeah, all the friggin' time. And some weeks it just feels like that I don't even have like a half day a week to just like be by myself in my room, just like with, you know, just thinking my thoughts. Like,
yeah, man.
And so sometimes the burnout of that, causes that same thing. You know, it's like even when things seem like they're going well, it's like it feels like smaller things can trigger that feeling of negative self-worth, you know?
Absolutely, man.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that timeline, Phil, and sharing your story with my listeners and viewers.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Our next little segment here is called The Real Reels.
Okay.
And so, to tell you and anybody tuning in for the first time, because I've been away for 6 months, The Real Reels is basically the part of the podcast that I value the most. Because it's like the realest talk you can have about this kind of stuff. Like the whole point of this podcast is to like break down the stigma, right, and like make these kind of conversations more accessible to people. Because I feel like mental health is definitely being talked about more these days than it ever has been before, and I'm very proud and happy to be a part of this generation that's making it happen. But there's still so much work that needs to be done. And there's still parts of the corners of the world that it isn't accessible to, and people don't take it seriously.
Yeah.
Or like they frown about it, or they don't talk about it. It's like, I want to get to the point one day where it's like you can walk down the street and be like, hey, how's it going? And be like, you know what? I'm not doing so good today. and it doesn't feel weird.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it should feel normal to respond that way.
Yeah, definitely.
You know what I mean?
I feel that. Yeah, everybody has that. You know, that thing where it's like you want to just say like, doing good, feeling fine.
Right? It's such a programmed fucking societal norm thing. It's just like, you just say, oh, I'm good, how are you? Good. And then you move on. You know what I mean? But it's like, sometimes we're not feeling that. So, and that's okay. And I want to make that more accessible. But anyways, that's the Real Reels. So there's only one question in the Real Reels. And it's just, you know, and you could be as open and honest as you want, Phil. Like, I never pressure my guests to be any deeper than they don't feel comfortable with going.
Okay.
Because obviously this is triggering for people, and it can be tough to talk about, obviously. But I give the platform to do so if they feel like they can. So basically the question is, for the Real Reels, what are the hardest moments you've had to deal with? Like, with your mental health? Like, what are some of the darkest moments that people might not know about you or might not see about you? I know it's a tough question.
Yeah. Just reflecting. Yeah. I think for me, like, the way my depression is manifested, I've just like, I used to have a lot of thoughts about killing myself. Like,
yeah,
a lot. And yeah, to the point that it almost started to feel like kind of a joke, you know?
Yeah.
When I was in high school, like, it just felt like it was like, yeah, like it almost like I was thinking about it so much it was almost like humor, you know?
That's probably a defense mechanism.
Yeah, and it started to feel like I would like incorporate that into my humor. And I feel like that is something that has not necessarily ever left me.
Right.
You know?
You feel like you're kind of like masking the truth almost.
Yeah.
Like, if I make a joke out of this, it's less real.
Yeah. But I feel like that also making those jokes has always kept the idea kind of at like a weird arm's length.
At bay almost.
Yeah. But I feel like, yeah, there's something about it that just, it feels like it stopped scaring me a long time ago, and I'm kind of worried about that sometimes. I feel like a lot of the time, like when I'm feeling really negative on myself, yeah, it literally just feels like, alright, well, whatever, I'll just fucking kill myself, it's cool.
Yeah,
you know?
It's
like,
very strange how depression manifests that feeling of like, that's the answer. Like, if I can't cope with it,
just freaking kill myself.
You can, like, that's just, it's like your brain, like, because I experienced the same thing, Phil. It's like, it'd be curious to do like a deep dive with myself or yourself about these feelings, about like, why does depression make us go to that answer first? You know, when we're at our lowest and like we're at that like dark place where you can't get out of bed, you can't function properly, like everything feels like it's failing, and your brain just goes, well, fuck it.
Whatever, yeah.
I could just kill myself, you know? It's like,
exactly,
it's scary, dude.
Yeah. Yeah, suicidal ideation, I feel like is really, it is scary. And I feel like, yeah, for a while I felt like I kind of almost normalized it with myself.
Right.
Especially in high school, you know? And it felt like at the time it was like you don't even want to tell your counselor or therapist that. Because it's like, you don't want to, like, I always had this other thing that was like, I don't want to freak people out though, you know?
Right, yeah.
I don't want to seem too friggin' weird. But yeah, but at the time it got pretty bad. And I feel like when it bubbles under the surface like that, it almost just feels like it's bringing it closer all the time, you know, like. But yeah, like I honestly probably when I was like 16 wouldn't have expected to still be alive like right now. Yeah.
That's heavy, man.
Yeah.
Was there ever a moment, and like, forgive me for if this comes across as prying, but
No.
I just am curious. Was there ever any attempt?
No, not necessarily. I used to Google like ways that I could do it where it would just not be painful. but I never like had access to my parents' car keys or anything like that.
Right, like to do the whole muffler
yeah,
thing.
or whatever. Yeah, like
the exhaust.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I feel like when I was younger too, I was like a little bit like blood and gore phobic, and so I never felt like I could like cut myself in that way. Like I just had this kind of like weird fear about gore.
Right, and the rope is not exactly.
No, yeah, and so maybe I'm lucky in that way. I never took it to that step, and a part of me thinks that all of my like joking about it is what kept it at that arm's length. Right. But I don't know, like, yeah.
But nevertheless, though, it's still scary that the thought even crossed your mind.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to speak for most people because I don't know most people, but I'm sure there's people out there that don't suffer as heavily with depression, or maybe don't suffer at all with depression, and that thought never occurs to them, you know, and it's like they're just living their life. And I mean, mortality is something in all of us, obviously. I'm sure we all think about death, but I don't know necessarily if the majority of the population thinks about how they're going to kill themselves, or like that they want to kill themselves, you know, like that's,
I feel that
it's a heavy thing to even cross your mind in the first place, right? So
yeah, and so I feel like in speaking to the counselor though, I am lucky that even though I'm not sure I was necessarily as honest with her as I could have been. Maybe I shouldn't have been, I don't know, but I think I learned a lot from that experience, which helped me. Just like, again, it's just like a self-worth thing, you know. It's like come back to the idea that just because I don't feel like I created the best thing, or I am the most popular, or I have the straightest teeth or whatever,
right,
you know, doesn't mean that I am unworthy of
a life,
being alive. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it's a lot.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Phil.
Yeah,
I'm sure it's not easy to talk about and for anybody, but
I'm not sure I ever really have that much other than to counselors and therapists.
Right, and like that's I don't want to say the word beauty because that's not what it is at all, but like that's the point of this pod, you know, and like if I can make that connection with people to the point where they allow themselves to be vulnerable like this, and you know, if my listeners and viewers see that and go, wow, okay, so like if they're able to do it, I can do it too. And it's just it just comes down to like, we're not alone in this, man. Like, here are two people right here that have been friends for 6 years, and we both experience suicidal thoughts, and we're having an open conversation about it, and it's not weird at all.
No, and I feel like it brings us closer together, and
absolutely,
and I think also through therapy I've learned that like it's not bad to talk about this stuff. It helps.
Absolutely, it helps. Because like you said, that bubbling or that repression makes it worse. Right? So my therapist always tells me to like, you got to take it from here and put it out in front of you. That's the only way you're going to deal with it properly. Yeah. If you keep it inside, you're never going to deal with it properly.
Yeah,
it's just going to fester.
Exactly, yeah.
And we don't want that.
No, we do not want that. Gosh.
All right, Phil. So thank you for being open in the Real Reels. Now let's end on a lighter note.
Okay.
So the last segment we have before we close out with our final thoughts is the rainbow segment. Okay. So basically, the rainbow segment is coming out of the darkness and into the light. So it's kind of like, you know, what are some of the ways that, you know, we've worked through the darkness of those dark moments we just talked about, like, because obviously we're still sitting here. We're having a conversation, so we've made it through some of the dark moments, and like, yes, we're only in our, well, I'm 30 and you're in your mid-20s, but there's still a lot of life to go, obviously, but you know, we're still here, still kicking. So in the rainbow segment, first question is, are there any positive things you discovered or are still finding out about yourself living with your mental health?
Yeah. All the time. I think, like, healing is a long journey. And I think just by living, yeah, I'm constantly finding out new things about myself and why I behave certain ways. And yeah, and I feel like I'm getting better at recognizing things that not only trigger me, but make me feel positive, you know?
Right.
And recognizing the ways in which I can basically set myself up for mental success.
Yeah, for
you
sure,
know?
man.
Yeah, and that's a lot more things than I used to think, you know.
And it's good too, man, because like from just talking to you in the last hour or so, like it seems like you've really identified where the issue of the manic depression comes from. Your attachment to the self-worth of the byproduct of what you create.
Yeah, no, totally, and and so I feel like now it's just kind of more understanding character traits. You know, I wanna know more about just like the way I relate to my friends and the way I trust people and the way I love people and whatever, and where that kind of stuff comes from. And I feel like that's like I'm feeling better and better about that all the time too. But I mean, a huge part of it, like, again, gotta shout out the therapist, man.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
That shit helps so good, and like really showed me. I'm not sure I really could have figured out that whole self-worth to like my creative product thing on my own. I mean, maybe I could have, but I think I would have just been so focused on the creative product that it would have just kept swinging back and forth.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. It helps getting that outside perspective for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that ties into my next question, actually, is have you found any constructive ways or solutions in dealing with your mental health?
Yeah.
And it sounds like going to therapy is one of them, obviously.
Huge. And yeah, but I mean, there's a ton of stuff, right? Like, for me, it's like I've realized every single part of my life affects my mental health. I guess it is like that for everybody. But for me, it's like if I eat well, that's like a step in the right direction.
Absolutely.
If I get enough sleep, it's a step in the right direction. You know, it's like if I like get some sunlight every day.
Yeah.
That helps hugely, you know?
Absolutely.
And if I do all of that stuff, it kind of feels like I'm almost like building up a barrier against those, like that feeling of failure, you know?
Yeah.
Then when bad stuff happens, it feels like less of a blow. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because you're like in a better state of mind.
Exactly, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. It does start with the little things, man. I always tell people, like, I mean, it's easier said than done, obviously, like, coming from over here, the host, like, ooh, whatever, like, you know, but I always tell people, it's like, yeah, you got to start with the small things, man. Like, everyone's so focused on tackling the big issue, which is fine, but, like, you have to build yourself up to get ready to tackle the big issue.
Yeah.
Like you just said, right? It starts with, eating better, exercising, getting sleep, getting sun, seeing your friends, like, making sure that you have, like, a foundation to work off of, you know?
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. And, yeah, and I don't think I realized that before, you know? I think I thought before that the success could do it all.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are, I don't want to say naive, but just definitely, like, in the dark about just viewing it that way, you know? Of, like, being like, take a step back, take a breath, and be like, right, there's all these things that are smaller in my life that I could do differently to help me tackle this better, so it doesn't seem so overwhelming when it does hit me.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah. And another thing, too, that I think I've learned is, like, to just let my friends and those around me, like, give me care and affection, you know?
Yeah.
I think I used to really think I could figure out everything on my own. And I think I've kind of learned recently that that's not the case.
Yeah. Open up, man. Use the network that you have. It's so important.
Totally.
Like, that's why they're there.
Exactly. And I'm lucky that, I feel like I have a lot of friends that do care about me. And a really needy cat named Kevin that's meowing.
Hi, Kevin.
Really loud.
I got Mr. Mikey back there, too.
Does the stream want to see Kevin?
Yeah, put it on.
No, here.
Kevin! Yes, this is awesome to end the pod with Kevin. Oh, Mr. Mikey wants to join the party, too.
Join the party, Mikey. Doop, doop, doop. Oh,
This has become
Kevin's done with the party.
a pet podcast. Yeah, man, and I think just to add one more point to your healing there, if I may, is the therapy, man. It's so important.
So important.
And like I've done, I think this is my 27th episode of this pod or something. I don't know,
Whoa.
but it keeps coming up again and again, man. Like how important therapy is. And I can't speak about it enough. Like it's especially in like today's world with everything happening right now. Like
Yeah. Even if you don't feel like you're depressed and upset and stuff, like just because of everything that's happening in the world right now, everyone should go to a therapist and talk about how they're feeling about stuff.
absolutely,
Yeah.
man. It's so
For
important
real.
to like just get it out of you and like find solutions to help better your life in any way possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and like I was saying too, it's like we can't do it on our own, you know.
No, we definitely need a support system.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Phil. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that. I'm sure the viewers and listeners learned a lot about you and your situation, and maybe some ways to help deal with it if they feel the same way. You know, like if they have manic depressive episodes, like you were talking about, or attachment to self-worth, like you were talking about. Those are like the two big core things that we discussed about your life today.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure there's people out there that struggle with the same thing, and I'm sure it's good for them to hear that you're still kicking and you found some methods to help,
Better than ever, baby.
you know, deal with that that kind of mental health path, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, dude. So, any final thoughts or feelings that you want to share to the listeners or viewers today, buddy?
Make some more art today, everybody. Don't forget to make some more art.
Yeah.
Making art, even bad art, and especially bad art, is the best way to release yourself of certain feelings. And I just hope that everyone today can take 1 second, even if it's just a mental picture you're painting, to make some shitty, terrible art.
A mental
You know?
break.
A mental break.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Saw the pun there. I had to take it.
Take it.
Awesome, man. Thank you for that. I'm sure. I agree. Everyone make
Yeah.
some art.
Make some
paint
art.
a picture or write a song
Don't be scared.
or go to a pottery class or something. I don't know.
Go to a pottery class. That actually is wicked. I want to go to a pottery class.
I want to as well. It seems really fun.
We should go together.
Let's do it.
Yeah,
It
let's
could be
do
that
it.
scene from that movie that I forgot the name of. Fuck.
I think Ghost.
Yeah, Ghost. That's it. Yes. Number one, Dad.
Yeah, that's me, dude.
There it is. All right, man. Dude, thank you so much for being on the pod. I really
You're
appreciate
welcome.
it, dude. This
Thank
has been
you for having me.
absolutely lovely conversation.
Yeah, oh my god. I'm so glad we had it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thank you. And anything that you want to shout out? Any plugs you got for the viewers to catch up on your life, man?
Shout out Taylor Simpson and the Wishful Feelings, baby. Fucking tunes on rad mode.
Thank you, my
is
friend.
what they should call you. And
Appreciate that. Thank you.
yeah, in my life,
Yeah.
come to my studio, everybody.
Do it.
Come.
Do it.
It's really cool.
Do you have a name for your
And-
studio, Phil?
No, so the old one was called The Cube, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the new one, since I just moved like a month and a half ago, it's kind of like we're still just finishing construction on it.
Yeah.
But I've been mulling over a name so crazy. Do you have anything that you could give me on this subject?
I'll have to come see the place, I think.
Okay,
Let me come see it, then I'll brainstorm.
do it. Yeah, send me some ideas, because
I will.
I can't call it The Cube anymore, so I'm going to have to call it something else.
Definitely not. I mean, I knew there was a brick
square.
wall there. That's about as much as I know.
The Box.
So you can be like the Brick Wall
The
Studios.
Brick.
Or the
Dude,
Brick.
Brick Studios.
Brick
Bricked up
Studios.
studios.
Bricked Up Studios.
Tossing Bricks Studios.
Yeah, something with brick in it.
Dude, brick is actually hard. Yeah, I should do
Brick
that.
in the Wall Studios.
Brick in the wall.
It could be like a Pink Floyd tribute studio. I don't know. Something's there. Something's there. We'll work on it. Yeah. Do you have like a website, Phil, or
Yep.
an email?
Superhotmixes.com.
There you go.
Superhotmixes.com. superhotmixes.com.
Superhotmixes.com. You heard it here, folks.
Yep.
Check it out.
Yep. Find me on Instagram at Cognac Max.
There you go.
I love to be alive. Send me a message.
Absolutely, dude. Hit up Phil. Can't speak highly enough of this man. He's been a great friend of mine and
Appreciate
an
you,
absolute amazing dude and super talented. And if you're an artist listening to this and you want to record some music or you're looking for a producer or even a session player, like hit up my man Phil. He's totally worth his weight in dimes.
In dimes. There we go, baby.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. We're back, baby. Mental Break is back. First episode in the books. Thank you again, Phil, for being on the show. And everyone drink some water and tell somebody in your life that you love them. Phil, I love you.
Love you too, Taylor.
All right, everybody. Make sure to rate this shit. Make sure to follow this shit on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or listening to your podcast. We got a YouTube channel as well, which you can see the video version. Hello. Check it out. Thank you guys. We'll see ya in the next one.